Karin Baqi. I'm a staff lawyer at the South Asian Legal Clinic of Ontario, otherwise known as SALCO, which is a community legal clinic funded by Legal Aid Ontario. We provide legal services to low-income South Asians living in the Greater Toronto Area, primarily in the areas of immigration law, income security law, and anti-discrimination law. As you may be aware, South Asians are both Canada's and Toronto's fastest growing racialized group, comprising about 14% of the City of Toronto's population. Of the 1.3 million South Asians living in Canada, roughly half live in the Greater Toronto Area. I know that there is, the panel before me had Professor Macklin talked about the law, the legal changes that are going to impact people, immigrants in Toronto, resulting in more precarious status people, more undocumented people. So I'm not going to really talk about the law. I wanted to talk about the impacts that we're seeing on the ground in our clinic, the kinds of issues that increasingly we have people coming to us for, especially I'd say in the last 3-4 years. Under an austerity agenda undertaken by all levels of government, including cuts to social, health, and legal services, our clinic, as well as others in the Legal Aid Ontario clinic system, have certainly seen a drastic rise in the demand for assistance in accessing basic rights to people's housing, income security, social and health services. It's very clear in our work at SALCO that the core of many clients' sort of well-being and basic human security centers around their immigration status. Over the last few years, we have seen the passing and implementation of extremely, pretty much unprecedented, punitive immigration and refugee laws and policies targeted at deliberately decreasing refugee and permanent residence acceptance rates and increasing the number of temporary foreign workers with precarious status. Professor Macklin obviously spoke about the modes in which this creates, by virtue of the way the law is set up and designed, people that are undocumented. Occurring alongside this, and this is where legal clinics come in, is there's also been a dramatic increase in the scale, sophistication, and technologies that are used in immigration enforcement. So in that, I'm talking about immigration arrests. So those are arrests that have nothing to do with someone breaking the criminal law. It's having to do with someone overstaying their status or being in Canada without status. So immigration arrest, immigration detention, and deportations. We have seen at SALCO an alarming rise in precariousness for most immigrants in Toronto, and the ramping up of the enforcement we're seeing on the ground is happening in our neighborhoods in this city, at people's homes, reports of people being picked up on the way to school, on the way to work, on the way to pick up their kids at daycare. We already know the situation in schools that we've heard from other deputes talk about, even at food banks, right? So put simply, Toronto is not safe or welcoming for undocumented people. More specifically in our clinic, what we've seen, I'd say this is more recent that we're seeing it, is a huge problem of homelessness and hidden homelessness in undocumented communities, obviously as a result of a complete dearth of affordable housing in the city, coupled with immigration status requirements to get into subsidized housing, and even then, of course, then there's the long wait list to get into Toronto community housing. I've also met a number of undocumented people that are, sort of captured under this idea of hidden homelessness, where people are living in their cars, in the basements of abandoned buildings. I met someone very recently who was living in the stockroom, undocumented person living in the stockroom of the convenience store that he worked at in exchange for his labor, right? And undocumented people, of course, are the fastest growing population of people living in the streets of Toronto right now in 2013. So obviously these sort of, living in your car, living in a stockroom of a store, these are not solutions, right? This is a way that people get by and a way in which people demonstrate their resilience and their will to survive, but it's not sustainable, right? And the City of Toronto obviously has a responsibility to all of its residents. Undocumented workers in large part fuel the city's economy, as people have spoken to before, and have huge problems accessing police services. Police routinely turn over people to CBSA. And that's becoming a major problem that we've heard others talk about. So I just want to point out and say that SALCO wholeheartedly recommends the adoption of the recommendations put forward in the in this document that you got in the Sanctuary City campaign. And yeah, hope that this is put forward as a motion to council. Thank you very much.